Hey guys, today we'll be learning how to create and customize your very own character step by step. But if you would like to download my project file that contains multiple character models with features, textures, and lighting already built and ready to go, then grab it from the link in the description. A few quick things when opening our new project. You can delete everything in your scene except the default cube. Select and press X to delete them. I also like to set up a few windows in our viewport. Go to the top right corner of the viewport window and select and drag that over to create a new window. Then go back and select that same corner and pull it down to divide this window. I'm going to change my top right window to be the shader editor. The bottom right we will keep in the 3D viewport, but we will be using it for our camera view later. I'm also going to be using the Eevee render engine. It is very fast, works well if you don't have a crazy fast GPU, and works well enough for the style of these characters. Cycles is great, and you can achieve amazingly realistic renders, but it's not necessarily needed for our purposes today. Last item of setup is to go to the Render Properties tab and turn on Ambient Occlusion, Bloom, Screen Space Reflections, and jump down to Shadows and change the cube size to 2048 and Cascade size to 2048. Now we are all set up, ready to begin. With our default cube selected, we are going to head over to the Modifiers tab, and we are going to throw a Subdivision Surface modifier on this guy. I'm going to set the Levels viewport to 3 and the Render to 4. Then right-click it and hit Shade Smooth. The Subdivision Surface modifier creates extra vertices that allow us to have a smooth, natural appearance while keeping simple controls on the overall shape. Now this is the part where we get to start having some fun. If we hop into edit mode by pressing tab, then we can manipulate these points and get to the shape of the head that we're looking for. We want to make sure that the X-ray view is turned on so that we can make sure to select both the vertices close to and further away from us. I like to be in orthographic view by hitting 1 on the numpad. That way I know I'm not accidentally moving points on the wrong axis. We can scale specific parts of the model up or down to create any shape we want for our base head model. We can also move vertices up or down by selecting them and pressing G to move the vertices. He could be a tall, thin face or a wide, short face. Whatever you like, go crazy. Now let me show you real quick why spheres wouldn't work for what you would need. If we add one in and tab into edit mode, we can see that it already starts with way more vertices than we would want to deal with. It would make it much more time consuming to select all of the correct vertices we want to manipulate. So let's get rid of this and get back to our cube. Now we can add in extra vertices to add refined control anywhere we want. I like to do that with the Loop Cut tool, and if you just find the spot you're wanting to add onto, then just click and it will add vertices all around the cube. Loop Cuts will default to the center, but you can also click and drag to place it wherever you would like. Now we can add extra definition in this area and give our little guy more character. Play around with scaling and moving vertices to find the head shape you're looking for. I try to stay in orthographic mode and move and scale vertices on the same plane to keep it symmetrical. Next I want to add in the eyes, so I'm going to jump back into object mode by pressing tab again, and then shift A to add another cube into the scene. Instead of going through the same steps to add the Subdivision Surface modifier again, I'm going to just select my new cube, then shift select the base head shape we just made, then hit Ctrl L. Now we can copy the same modifiers we used on our first object, and it will apply to our new object. Now let's right click and shade smooth. Just a nice time-saving tip, especially if you start stacking multiple modifiers and you don't want to have to go through and recreate it step by step. Now that he's a smooth guy, we're going to want to scale this down and place it where his eyes should go. Press S to scale and get it to the size you like. Then let's hit the G key and move it over to where the first eye will be. Now that we've got that in the right place, instead of duplicating this and placing it on the other side, which you totally could do, we're going to use another modifier to save us more time. Let's go to the Modifiers tab and select the Mirror modifier. This modifier mirrors our object on its axis, depending on where the origin point is. So now we can place that perfectly symmetrical on his face. Now we'll do the same thing for the pupil. Let's duplicate our original eye with Shift D. That will keep all the modifiers we have all ready to go. Now we just need to resize it a bit and move it forward. Perfect! Now I want to mention that just like how we made the shape of the head, we can modify the eyes to look however we want. Just tab into edit mode and remember to use the X-ray view to be able to select all points. Now we can make them taller or shorter and style them however we want. And what's great about the mirror modifiers we used is that any changes we make on the original eye will automatically apply to the mirrored version. Saves so much time! Okay, let's move on to the nose. We're actually going to be using a different method for this one. We're going to be using metaballs. That's right, metaballs. What's nice about metaballs, and why I like using them, is that they automatically smooth the space between any metaball. So if we add a metaball with Shift A, and then add another by duplicating it with Shift D, you can see when I move this over that they act as if they are connected to each other, like liquid. Magic! So if we use these metaballs, it will give us a pretty natural look without having to remesh. Plus I just think they're fun to play with. One thing to note about the metaballs is that you may notice they aren't exactly super smooth out of the gate. We can't subdivide it in the traditional way, but it's super easy to get this looking good. Just head over to the green Object Data Properties tab, and you'll see it has a resolution viewport and render settings. Right now it's set to 0.4 and 0.2. If you slide the viewport number to the left, you'll see the metaball become smooth. It's essentially controlling the amount of subdivision just in a different way. So set it to whatever feels right for your situation. I'm going to set mine to about 0.1 for both viewport and render settings. Viewport is the resolution you're seeing right now, and the render setting is for when it is actually rendered. So if you're working on a bit slower of a computer, then you can totally set your viewport resolution higher so that it doesn't bog you down, and keep the render setting where you're going to want it for the final output. Okay, so now let's delete this duplicate metaball and resize our original to be the tip of the nose. You can use the numpad to toggle between views, so I'm going to hit 3 on my numpad to switch to the side and get this in a spot I think I would like. Now let's just duplicate that with Shift D and switch back to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Press S to scale and then Z to isolate the scaling to the Z axis. Now we can scale that up to be the bridge part of the nose. Toggle back to the side view with 3 on the numpad and let's rotate that by pressing R and getting that to the correct angle. Now all we have to do is duplicate that original metaball again and use it for the nostrils. Move it over to the right side and toggle to the side view to move that back to the right spot. Now jump back into the front view, duplicate that nostril, and move it over to the other side. Unfortunately, we can't use modifiers with metaballs, so no mirror modifier, but since it's just for this section of the process, it's not too bad. Again, this is an opportunity for you to give a special feature for your character. The nose can be long or short, wide or skinny, it's totally up to you. You don't even have to use this long part, we can take that off and make it more of an understated nose. You do you, my friends. Now to the mouth. Let's press Shift A to add a curved circle. It comes in lying flat, so let's rotate it by hitting R, and then X to isolate it on the X axis. Then type 90 to bring it around 90 degrees. Now tab into edit mode, and you'll see this circle is actually just made up of 4 points. And if you're familiar with Illustrator or Photoshop or any vector program, then these node handles will look familiar. We can grab any of these nodes and pull them to make them whatever shape we want. So I'm going to grab the top point and just drag the whole thing down. You can see how this is already looking like a smiling mouth shape. And if we head on over to our trusty green Object Data tab, then we can bring this bad boy to life. First, let's go down under the Geometry section, and under the Bevel section within, we find Depth and Resolution. Slide the depth up, and hey, there's the mouth. Now, you can up the resolution a bit, but I wouldn't worry too much about that one. To really smooth this out, we're going to go up to the top of this Object Data tab and slide that resolution up. Again, the preview slider is for what we're seeing right now in the viewport display, and the render slider is for when it actually is rendered. It's not a heavy process though, so I'm going to bump the preview up to about 25 and the render up to 40. Now let's move this mouth to the right spot. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to switch to the side view and move this closer to the head. We can rotate this a bit forward by hitting R. Now the only thing left for the mouth is bringing the sides in to contour the shape of the face. Right now they're just sticking out, so let's fix that. In the front view, let's tab back into edit mode and grab the side points. Then let's jump up to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Just move them by pressing G and moving them back until they match the same curve as the head. Now that he can see, smell, and talk, let's give him some ears. So let's add another cube and then copy the modifiers from our head and shade it smooth. Let's scale it down and move this to the right side of the head. Now let's go to the side view and scale this on the Y-axis by pressing S, then Y. Now we can add a loop cut to the thin part of our cube to give this area more definition, making the edges less rounded. Now let's jump back to the front view and switch to the face selection mode. Let's select the front face of our cube and press I to inset that face and give us more geometry to work with. Let's pull it in just a bit and then left click to set it. Now with this new face still selected, let's go back to the side view and press E to extrude this face. Set it back toward the back of the ear. Now we've got the basic shape of our ear. It's a pretty simple shape, but it's enough. And you're enough, exactly how you are. I'm going to jump to the top view to rotate these just a bit so they're not sticking out at a perfect 90-degree angle. Now if we slap a mirror modifier on it, we have our ears. Alright, let's give this guy some brows. Let's add another cube and give it the old modifier treatment and shade him smooth. Let's do a general scale down, then jump into the side view and scale it down on the Y-axis, and then scale it down on the Z-axis as well. Now we can go back to the front view and tab into edit mode to add an edge loop to the center of the brow. Now I'm going to grab these new vertices and pull them up a bit. I also want to jump into the top view and pull it out so that the eyebrow matches the curve of the face. Tab back into object mode and let's rotate that slightly, and now we can jump back down to the front view and move and rotate this to give him some expression. Now all we need to do is add the mirror modifier, and we're done here. I do want to mention here that you don't have to use the mirror modifier for everything like we have been. It's a good starting point, but if you want to take it a step further, then we can apply the mirror modifier over in the modifier tab by hitting this drop down menu and selecting apply, or just by hitting Ctrl A or Command A if you're on a Mac. Then let's tab into edit mode and press Alt A or Option A to deselect all the vertices. Make sure you're in the X-ray view and let's select all of the vertices from this brow. Then press P to bring up the Separate menu and we will select Separate by selection. Now we can tab back into object mode, click off, and now we have two separate objects. We want to rotate this, but you'll notice that the origin is not in an ideal spot. It's rotating from the anchor point, which is not even where the mesh is. So to fix that, let's go up to the object drop down, set origin to center of mass. Now our anchor point, or origin, is in the center of the brow, and when we rotate it, it rotates from the center and not from way outside its own mesh. So I'm going to rotate this to the left and move it up a bit. Alright, so now let's move on to the last part of modeling, which is the hair. After this, we can move on to lighting, texturing, and then finally rendering. Now there are quite a few ways to do hair. The way we're going to do it is just modeling, similar to how we've been modeling everything else. But if you're interested in learning how to do a bit more realistic hair, then let me know in the comments and I'll make that happen. So in the front view, let's add a plane with Shift A. Let's move that up with G and get it to sit right above the head. Now we'll scale it down pretty small. Now we can go to the top view and tab into edit mode. We're going to add a mirror modifier, and if we move this over, we can see that it's working how we want it. Pull it over to the right, and then we're going to make sure clipping is enabled. With clipping, if a vertex comes to the center, it will join with its partner from the other side and stay stuck together. If you ever accidentally put two together that you didn't want to, then just uncheck clipping, move the vertex back, and then check clipping back on. Now add a shrink wrap modifier and we will eyedrop the head as our target. Now our mesh will stay perfectly on our head shape as we create it. Let's also add a solidify modifier, and we're actually going to have to set it to a negative value to have it go the direction we want. And finally, let's also add a subdivision surface modifier and bump up the divisions. Now the order of these modifiers does matter. Blender calculates them from the top down, similar to layers in Photoshop. You can see that if I move the subdivision up above the solidify, it changes because it's now subdividing before solidifying, whereas before it was adding dimension and then subdividing it smoother. We'll put that back down to the bottom, and now we're ready to model the hair. Just jump into the side view, make sure you've got the X-ray view turned on, grab the back vertices, and start extruding backward with E. Keep the length fairly short so that there's no clipping through the head. Follow the contour of your head shape and try and keep it at a reasonable distance. The further away from the shrink wrap target, then the less predictable your results will be. Shrink wrap relies on subdivision to be able to find the nearest vertex to jump to, so the less vertices that we have in the hair, then the less accurate our shape will be. Once you have modeled front to back, we will be jumping between the top and the side view to finish the rest. From the top, let's grab all of our vertices that are facing out toward the side of the head and extrude in that same direction. Since we are only extruding along a single plane, we will use scale to help it try and follow the curve of the head more closely. This will likely be the messiest part of the process, as scaling will probably move a few spots that we don't want. So it will be a bit of back and forth between scaling and then just grabbing vertices and moving them wherever we want. Then just repeat, extrude, scale, then adjust. Extrude, scale, adjust. You have finished modeling your character. You are amazing. Okay, let's wrap this up. First, let's add a camera so that we can see our bounds. Shift A to add a camera, jump to the side view and pull the camera back. You can press 0 on the numpad to see the camera view. Now just position it within the frame wherever you would like. We will tweak a few more settings after light and texture. In our camera viewport, switch over to rendered mode so that we can start to see how this will look rendered. Add a plane, rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. Now move it behind your character and scale it up to fill the frame. Now lighting. Add an area light, move it up and to the right. Rotate it toward your character. Now move it forward just a bit. Adjust the power of the light to what looks good to you. You can scale your light up or down to give softer or harsher shadows. The larger the light, the softer the shadows, and vice versa. For texturing, we are going to make a simple plastic material that is super easy to make. Select one of the parts of your character and head over to the Red Materials property panel. It may already have the default material applied. If so, then great. If not, then just click New. Go to your shader editor window and you'll see the material setup. The Principled BSDF is a versatile shader. We will just be tweaking a few settings, but feel free to play around with all of the other settings. First things first, you can change the color in this base color node. Just click on the color box and it will pop up all the options to adjust your color. RGB, HSV, and hex should be fairly familiar to most designers and illustrators. If you have a specific hex code, then you can use the hex tab. If I don't have a specific color, I usually just find myself playing around with HSV and the value slider. Once you've decided on your color, we're going to add a little subtle texture. Press Shift A and select Search. Now type in bump and select it. Connect the normal output to the normal input of the Principled shader. Just click and drag. You'll notice nothing really changed on your model's texture yet. It just needs some information on how to display the bump. Let's search for another input by pressing Shift A and searching for the noise texture. Just add that behind the bump and connect the factor output to the height input. Now we have texture, but it is not good. All we need to do is crank up the scale on the noise texture, then adjust our distance to be much lower. Texturing and lighting are huge factors in breathing life into your models. Most people will probably use too much texture. Subtlety will do way more for you and look so much better in the end. Keep it simple and try not to go overboard at this point. Let's name our material and make some more. Now, to keep the same basic material setup, but apply it to different models that will be different colors, we just need to select a different mesh, go to the Red Material Properties tab, and select our material we just made. Now, if you want to keep some parts of your character the same color, like the hair and the eyebrows, just keep it on that material. But if you want to change the color without changing all of the others, we just need to select this number you see next to our material name. This number indicates how many different meshes are using the same material and are linked together. But if we select the number, you'll see it change the name and we no longer have a number. Now it's created a copy of our original material and it's one of a kind, just like you. So we can rename this to whatever material you want to make next, and then all we have to do is change the color. Repeat the same process until you have all of the character textured how you would like it. Let's add a simple texture to our backdrop and now we are ready to render. We've already been looking at our render quality in the bottom right corner, so we know how this is going to turn out. In the Output Properties tab, you can set your resolution, and then all we have to do is go up to Render on the top menu bar and select Render Image. You can also use F12 as a shortcut. Eevee tends to take a minute to set everything up for rendering, so don't freak out if it just looks black for a bit. But once it renders fast. Now just select Image, Save As, and select your save location. Now just select the Save As Image button, and you're done. I want to note that you can 100% do this in the Cycles render engine. For those with fast enough computers or Job's patience, then it's the route I prefer to go. Just know that switching over from Eevee will be slower, but will look much more realistic. And that's it, guys. Please share with me what you create by tagging me on Instagram. I would love to see how you make it your own. Until next time, thanks for following along.